Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads, along with Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian, and today's conversation again, I always say these are fascinating conversations because I'm always fascinated by our guests and the work that they're doing. Our guest, Stephanie Bohn, today is an advocate and has created a business that provides resources, much needed resources, to our community, and her journey along the way to get here is fascinating as well. So hang on, stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. Hi, everyone. I am Brian Altunian, along with Sean Francis, and this is another episode of Just Two Dads. We're closing in on 200 episodes. We started this about 4 years ago, just having conversations with amazing people, and the list of amazing people continues to grow. We get to talk to people who are servicing the special needs community in some form or fashion, some people who have taken their own family's situation and turned it into an opportunity to create resources that are much needed. Others that just contribute to the community. Either way, we're blessed to be able to have conversations with them. We think it changes the world, sort of one conversation at a time. So before we get into today's conversation with Stephanie, I just want to thank you. We are now recording this season. We're recording all of our episodes and then releasing them on Wednesdays, on Facebook and on podcast outlets everywhere. So if you're hearing us on a podcast outlet or catching us on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thank you for making us part of your listening day. If you're catching us on video, we've kind of changed the format up a little bit. We're doing our best to get the word out to as many people as possible. And it's been effective lately. We've gotten a lot of feedback lately. We've gotten a lot of inquiries, people who want to be on the podcast, people with recommendations for folks to be on the podcast. So we're really excited about the impact we're starting to have almost 4 years into this. We never know, right? When you start a podcast, you never know if there's going to be a reach, if there's going to be an impact. But lately, we've had a lot of evidence, and we're very excited. And today is no exception. Today is going to be a great conversation. We actually got a chance to meet Stephanie at a live event for caregivers, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point here. So before we get into it, again, thanks, everybody. Thank you to Billy Footwear for always being a good partner of ours. Billy Footwear makes adaptive footwear. We're going to put in the show notes a link to Billy Footwear. You can get an additional percentage off. Is it 15 or 25? Sean?
25%.
Okay,
25% your final price. That includes when they have sales as well. So
yeah. So and by the way, adaptive footwear for anybody who just who struggles putting their shoes on, and it doesn't really matter how, and they're amazing. And the story about Billy, the founder, is absolutely incredible. So I encourage you to go to billyfootwear.com and find out more about Billy and his company. All right. So I think we did it all. We'll talk about the den towards the end of the show. So without further ado, Sean, are you feeling good today? I like the look. The look is kind of narrowed here. Focus. You feeling good about this?
Yes.
I feel like they've caged us in a little bit to some degree.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like the visual closeness. And I just want to express my gratitude. You talk about, if a tree falls in the forest, if no one's around, did it really fall? And when you decide to metaphorically chop down a tree, which is starting a podcast, and the tree falls, you're like, did anybody even hear that? Are we making an impact? Are we connecting with anyone? And the level of gratitude that we have for the sound of the falling tree that's taken place is immeasurable. And as we are in our second day of Autism Awareness Month as well, I want to welcome to our show someone who is a hero. We always say that one of the first qualifications for being a hero is not thinking that you're one, but this lady is doing heroic work. We're going to talk about what allowed her to take her life's challenges and turn that into a business, an opportunity, and a service. And welcome to Just Two Dads, Stephanie Bohn.
Thank you so much. And I'm totally taking you up on that discount code for Billy's because my daughter has a closet full of Billy's.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Awesome.
That's so great to know. Yes, that's great. I'll make sure we share that with Billy as well. So, we talked about being a hero or heroine. Every hero has superpowers, and a hero's superpowers come from their origin. So why don't we start with that? Tell us a bit about you, who you are, where you come from, physically, spiritually, the whole 9 yards, because that has everything to do with how you respond to a diagnosis that your child may have, and then how you dare to turn that into service to others and resources for others, and quite frankly, income for yourself, whatever the case might be, and about adding value to people's time. So why don't we start there?
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess the shortest answer is I'm a Los Angelino by way of New York. I am New York born and bred, born in Queens, grew up out on Long Island, and then moved to Manhattan.
Okay.
So those are my roots. I was sort of the black sheep of the family moving out west. Everyone else is still back east. I'd say, like, reflecting on my upbringing and the kind of the formation of me. It was pretty idyllic. I grew up in a nuclear family, 2 happily married parents, a brother just a few years older than me, and we were very close. And my parents never fought. I really can't imagine. I can't think back to a time when there was strife in the household. My mom was a really incredible, brilliant, powerful executive. She went back to school when my brother and I were little. She was a teacher, and then felt kind of unfulfilled and looked in the paper to find out what other jobs there were. And she kept seeing jobs for accountant. And so she just decided to study accounting and took her accounting exam. And most people don't pass in their first try, and they break it up into chunks. And she, with 2 kids in tow, going to class. I remember being in the lecture halls with her as a 3-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Passed in one fell swoop, and then just sort of like launched her career. And she was my idol in every sense of the word. She was this wonderful woman who did it all professionally, but also was home and made dinner every night. And my dad was in law enforcement and had the coolest, craziest stories to tell us, but was probably like, on the mean streets of Manhattan, during the day, and then came home and drove me to dancing school and, tried to braid my hair successfully.
Wow. I had an uncle growing up that served with NYPD as well. Wow.
Yeah, my brother, he's an artist, and he has an artist temperament, and we never fought. And so I say that all to say I grew up, and our family was often compared to the Beaver Cleaver family. Like, everything was just fine and great and lovely. And I was thoroughly, thoroughly unprepared for what transpired when I became an adult. I wouldn't change anything about my childhood, but I really, I didn't have any kind of like battle scars to fuel me and help me navigate some of the hardest, most, unimaginable things that I faced in my 30s. So, I moved to California to get my master's degree at UCLA, and then decided to stay and kind of, make my own roots here, and had a career in the film industry. And then moved into technology. But when I was pregnant with my second daughter. I have 2 daughters. My older one is now 14. My younger one is 11. And my younger one, her name is Sadie, and my older one is Lucy. I was pregnant with Sadie, and they're 3 years apart, but a month apart. And so we were having a birthday party for my older one. And while I was very pregnant, my mom came out and dad to help with the party, and she was coughing a lot, and we just assumed she had pneumonia. And she, she was like fully present, but also was doing spreadsheets and working. She was the CFO of a military aircraft parts company, like really.
Wow.
And so she left the party and flew to a board meeting. And then, I went, I delivered Sadie a few weeks later. And so when I was in the delivery room, I was told that my mother was getting results back from some biopsies and some tests, because she still had that cough that wouldn't go away. An hour after I delivered Sadie, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she was given a few months to live. So it was like,
Wow.
It was the most weirdest, like, circle of life, bittersweet, the happiest and most imaginable moment with my idol and best friend, and my rock was about to leave me. Yeah. So that was really, really hard to navigate. But I skipped over another part when I was, we were trying to get pregnant before Lucy. And I was almost 6 months along. We went in for a structural ultrasound just to find out what the gender was. This was my first pregnancy. And we learned at that appointment that it was not a viable pregnancy. And organs were all in the wrong parts, and he probably wouldn't survive, and my health was at risk. And so I had to terminate that pregnancy. And I was not prepared for a tragedy like that. I was visibly very pregnant, and all of my friends from work were waiting for me to come home and come back to work and tell them if it was a boy or a girl. And so I wasn't, that was sort of like the first scar. And from that moment, for 5 years, it was like tragedy, we tried our best to live our lives and be good, but it was that. And then I lost my mom. And then 7 months later, Sadie was diagnosed with a brain disorder called Rett syndrome. And we learned that she would never be independent. She would lose the ability to speak, to use her hands. She'd probably never walk. She'd have epilepsy. She would have severe anxiety and gastro issues. And, it was a cascade of things that when you learn if you have Rett before you have the symptoms, you're just sort of watching a train or a car crash in slow motion. So then there were a few little health scares in between, and it was just like I couldn't catch a break for about 5 years, and I was working full time. And I just kept reflecting on like, wow, I'm so lucky that I'm confident, I love myself, and I'm happy, and I have great parents, and I was born to, have self-respect and, be ambitious, all the things that a great childhood gives you. Mm-hmm. But I really had no idea how to handle the crumbling that was apparently like my life for that period of time. And so that rebuilding of me, that reconstruction was hard. And, there was certainly consulting with some therapists and friends and, a support system. But what it did for me on the other end, it made me so much stronger, so much more ambitious, resilient, empathetic, interesting, frankly, as a person, as a human, able to connect with other humans at a deep level than I ever would have been had all of these things not happened. So too high a price to pay, but I do constantly go back to what's the silver lining here.
I was going to ask you two things. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Start with one.
Yeah.
Start with one.
No, this is a good, this is a good two. They're related. Because especially one of them is just a yes or no. Brian and I have talked, trying to work through it. I have never been diagnosed with anything, but the way my brain processes, and that's an example of it. I keep thinking like, hey, where am I at? What do I have? But the first question is just, did you grow up with a, not so much religious, but a faith present in your life? That's one. And then two, how long did it take to go from the natural why me, why us to here is what I would not have were it not for these things? Because that's not easy to come by when your spiritual muscles haven't picked up any weight, so to speak. In other words, I grew up in a fairly idyllic environment as well. And so when my challenges came, I quite frankly, I was a wimp. And you don't sound like that at all.
I couldn't be a wimp because I didn't have my mom, and my mom made me a wimp, in some ways. I talked to her 3 times a day, every day. She knew when I changed my, when I tied my shoe, what I was making for dinner. Mm-hmm. I called her all the time. My whole life I was like that. And she was such a force for me. She was also, frankly, a crutch. Like I didn't even make a decision without checking with her. And so when she was not available for me, when Sadie was was diagnosed and we had to rethink everything, I then actually turned to her best friend, who was kind of like a second mom to me growing up, who was in deep, deep distress, losing her best friend and couldn't even help me. And I got angry at that because I thought, like, I lost my mom. You might have lost your, but I have worked through those emotions, but I didn't have her either. So I didn't
Yeah.
have a mother figure. My mother-in-law was, wonderful and was there, but I didn't have that rock. And so I was just, it was almost like I was thrown in the deep end, and I was either going to sink or I had to figure it out. And I had to kind of look inside and realize, like, I did know the right decisions to make, and I could do things on my own, and I could ask other people. And my dad's been wonderful, but I found the strength in myself, and I had to. I didn't have a choice. I would say when I grew up, I grew up in a Jewish household. My parents were kind of in the Jewish parlance, conservative. I went to Hebrew school growing up and celebrated the high holidays, but I was always a little bit of a skeptic, and I would always challenge my grandparents and my parents, like, I'll do the thing if you can tell me why. Bless the candles, but why?
Why?
Do I have to wear something on my head, but my brother does? Like, I was always questioning why. What's the point?
That's great. I don't think most of us ask.
You just described Judaism, by the way. That is Judaism. Always question why.
Why? Because I think most people's religion, most people, especially young adults, don't have a religion that is theirs. They have a religion, if they have any, they have that which has been put upon them.
Yeah.
So to question that is great.
So I've continued that. Like, I don't want to make my kids do anything unless there's real reason and intention.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just because we've done it and it's tradition, but sometimes it's not. And I think that there's a lot of hypocrisy in religion in general. There's a lot of hypocrisy in Judaism. And so I'm not a religious person now, but of course, I'm still proudly Jewish. And I don't know that my faith played much of a role in
interesting
in that, and that the reason is because of the concept of predetermination. A lot of religions, I think Judaism included, have this kind of narrative of, you're given what you can handle, or it was meant to be. And I just don't believe that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the score is ever settled in life. I think some people just have less tragedy and more good stuff, and other people get more than they deserve. I don't think the score evens out at the end, and I don't think people are given something because they have the tools and they can handle it. I'll admit, like, I didn't handle it well for a long time, and I'm just doing, I think, what any parent would do in loving my child and thinking of all the ways that I can create some meaning and purpose out of this experience. But I don't believe that it was meant to be, or that I was given it because I'm a certain person.
Sure.
I love this.
How about your husband in all of this? Can you talk about him and his role, and again, as a support for you without your mom and you?
Yeah, I think one of the things we learned with the loss of our son in my first pregnancy was that men and women, and he and I, grieve differently. And we didn't know what that grieving experience and expression would look like.
Yeah.
There's no playbook. And so I grieved probably more by the book. Like, it was immediate and intense. And I wound up doing some acupuncture with this wonderful woman who had me journal and gave me mantras, and it was woo-woo. And I can get with it, but I also am just inherently a little bit of like, come on. But I did it because I was broken. We tried for a long time to get pregnant, and then to lose that pregnancy. It was really hard for us. So mine was sort of more by the book. I would say my husband's was more delayed. And when it came out, it didn't come out as grief. It was just, we were like kind of bickering a little bit, or he would say something that was like very unintentionally off. And it occurred to me, this may be him grieving, and it's not supposed to make sense. And it's not necessarily supposed to be contextual. And so I said to him, I may be wrong, but this may be your grief coming up. And I just want to give you a pass. Like, I'm not gonna start a fight. I'm not gonna get defensive. I love you. And in the event that I'm right, I want to just give you the space. And so
Amazing.
eventually, these what I would say is these really, really trying experiences have brought us closer and closer together. And I've realized how unique that is, because I think the divorce rate with families with these kinds of circumstances is probably 80%.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And for us, it certainly made us stronger and appreciate one another, but also for me, appreciate that we're not going to react the same way. We're not wired the same way. We're very different people.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
can I ask you, how old were you when you lost the first pregnancy?
I was 33.
33. And the reason I'm asking, I had a very similar situation when my daughter was diagnosed, and my father-in-law was also diagnosed with deteriorating, health issue, and we were sandwiched, right? We were caring for both, and the capacity to do both and maintain our, work lives, and our relationship was way, 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 way down at the bottom of the list, way down at the bottom of the list, until, eventually it didn't survive, because we were caring for, people other than ourselves and trying to do the best we could. So I'm part of that 80%, unfortunately, that statistic. So that's why I was just curious how your husband and subsequent issues with the loss of your mom and Sadie's diagnosis. I mean, because we have a dad's support group for fathers of kids with special needs, we talk about these sort of issues and how men deal with grief and diagnoses and relationships and marriage, and how, what are the kinds of things that we can do. And by the way, what you just said about your description of his grief is very much, in line with how I think men are in general. We bottle it, push it down, and then it comes out in, certain ways that don't make a lot of sense. You're also incredibly rare in being
insightful.
A partner who's giving you a pass. I understand. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Yeah. That's obviously, you know who he was and remembered who he is versus what he's going through. That is a very difficult thing to do when he's not the only one going through it, and you are as well.
That's right. Yeah.
You should write a book.
No, seriously. And because here's the thing. The one thing I've learned from the show is that I've developed where, I could attain 50 years of wisdom in one day, and I will never allow myself to be an expert, and I will never allow myself to say, here's what you should do, because I think what separates you from quote unquote experts and allows you to add more value to people is allowing people to be who they are, allowing them to become who they may, by just simply sharing, here's what I've learned along the way. Let me share this with you. And what you've just said is either something that someone has innately or gets through a whole lot of trial and error. There's a lot of trial and error that can be saved by people hearing what you just shared.
Yeah. When I skipped over something that to me is now insignificant, but when I was a kid, I was born deaf in my right ear, and I had to have many, many surgeries when I was a kid to reconstruct the ear. And, it was not health related, it was cosmetic, but all that time spent in the hospital as a kid, my mom used to say to me, everyone has something. And certainly that made me appreciate just the general concept of diversity and, invisible disability. You may not know what's, but it also, I think, planted a seed in me that, people kind of process information differently and grieve differently and think differently and act, and that's okay. Everyone has something, and whereas I may have this thing, that puts me in the hospital, like I'm a happy kid. So like, here's the good, here's the bad, but that everyone has something, I think probably is maybe one of the foundational seeds that helped me think the way that I do.
Amazing. Love that. And where are you doing now? I want to talk about Truly and what you're doing. How did your experience translate into you creating a company that provides resources? Can we jump to there, or did we cool, Sean? Kind of jump to that.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. How do we get to, because you're seeking these services and everything, how do you get to having the the nerve and vision. So yeah, turn that into a business, which is as we understand, brand new too.
Yes. Well, I'll say my journey being a parent, and this may resonate with others. I really had a hard time with the word disability for a long time. When Sadie was younger, and I knew she had this disorder, and it was unraveling, and new symptoms were appearing every year, and she was continuing to regress for a while. But I was in denial, and I didn't want to associate myself with the word disability in the disability community, because it meant very scary things for me. And I thought, I have my friends, I have my community. I don't want to be in another community. And then what I realized as I started to meet wonderful people, my first friend in the community, who I think might have been a guest on this show, is Kelly Coleman, who,
Oh yeah,
my guest, anyone listening to your show knows who she is.
our good friend, Kelly Coleman. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was my first friend. And, I took Sadie to an early intervention program, and I walked in, and I was sort of telling myself, I'm not going to make any friends. I'm just going to drop her off and go do my thing. And then I ran into Kelly, and damn, she's cool. She's great.
Yeah. Hard to just walk away and go do something else when you're in Kelly's space, right? That's
true.
So we became fast friends, and I realized there actually are very cool, interesting people that are, that would fill my bucket in this community. And lo and behold, they also helped me navigate a lot, because, I was new in my journey, and Kelly was a few steps ahead. And so are some of the other parents that I met that gave me really, really useful advice on how to navigate the system, and also navigate my emotions. And so as I kind of inched toward actually being okay with, and then being quite proud of being part of this community, my natural next step was like, well, how can I contribute to it? And so I wound up befriending a wonderful woman named Keely Cat Wells, who is a very well-known disability advocate. She has an incredible company called Making Space. And we became fast friends. And she's not a parent, but she has a disability herself. And she, it's funny, I served as a mentor to her, but she taught me way more. And she really explained the social model of disability, and that it's not Sadie's fault. It's the world around us. It's society that is creating these blockers and barriers for Sadie to have access to stuff. If there's not a ramp, if we can't open a door, so on and so forth. And so it started to, as I was learning about the social model of disability, I started getting really pissed off, because it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
There should be an acknowledgement that, there's disabled people all around us, and there's no reason to keep them out. And it just felt to me a lot like segregation. And so I just got angry. And we are big fans of UCLA, and we go to a lot of sporting events there, women's sports in particular. And we went to Poly Pavilion many times to watch the UCLA gymnastics team compete. And when we go as a family, they put Lucy and Andy in the lower section, and they park Sadie and me up in the rafters, because they only have one disability or wheelchair accessible section. So Sadie can't see a thing, and it's so demoralizing. And she can't be near any of the fans and hear the cheering and really have the fan experience. And by the way, neither can any student who uses a wheelchair. So it made me so angry. And so I went on this path of, I want to fix this. This is wrong. I went to UCLA. I'm embarrassed to say that this is my alma mater, and this is how they treat it. And then I started looking around at all the other sporting arenas. The tennis center, the softball is a little bit better, but there's so many barriers, and it's so inaccessible to wheelchair users. And so I started my own kind of campaign and wrote to the school, and lo and behold, my pal Keely connected me with Judy Human, who I'm sure both of you know who she is, but she was the matriarch of the ADA, and she's written incredible books, and she was the kind of like the key figure in the movie Crib Camp, and she's worked for Clinton and Obama. I mean, she's just incredible, and she has since passed, but I was fortunate enough to have a Zoom with her shortly before she passed away, and she gave me incredible guidance and advice and mentorship, and gave me the courage to say, like, yeah, she said, I was just one person, and the things that she led sit-ins and changed laws and wrote that, was a key figure in writing the Americans with Disabilities Act. And she was a disabled woman. And I'm like, if you can do that, I can do this.
Right.
Like, I can do this. And so, you know, I have my MBA. I know how to do things. You know, and I do have all my facilities, and I do have a network. So I was just thinking about like all the things that I do have. I'm like, I'm going to try this. And so I started my own campaign, and I eventually got them to retrofit the stadium. And there's still work to be done, but they did it. And I wrote
How long did that take?
a year, but they did it.
That's still pretty
Not
quick.
bad, actually. Yeah.
No,
Not bad.
So I wouldn't relent. And you know, it was such a specific issue. It was like so small, like this one arena at this one university, but I got such a thrill from that. It was such a high. It was kind of like I did the deal. And and when we showed up for a volleyball game, after they notified me that they made changes, and we were wheeled to the new section on the floor with a whole row for wheelchair users. What do you think happened? It was filled. There were kids in wheelchairs and their families. The cheerleaders walked by us and high-fived everyone, and they were so included and so much a part of the fan experience. If you build it, they will come. And I felt so good. And that was really kind of the first seed of, okay, if I could do that, what else can I do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I've done a lot of advocacy work with cannabinoids, which is probably a whole other podcast episode, but there's some legislation that's putting the legalization of medical grade cannabis and hemp products at risk, which is very, very bad for disabled people in California. So I did some of that work over the summer in Sacramento. And then, you know, as I was deciding what I wanted to do next after I left a job last year, I thought, like, I've always wanted to fix the caregiving problem. I felt this even before I had a disabled child, that the options to find babysitters and nannies and such were really scary and limited.
Right.
And then when I had Sadie, the navigation of finding people that I could trust and that were the right fit and showing up for the right reasons, it didn't exist. And so I decided to fix the problem and build the solution that I need and that millions of other families need. And as I was putting together the business plan, I joke, if I was a 25-year-old bro, I would have just walked into a VC's office, gotten some money, and just built the thing. But I'm a 50-year-old woman, so I wrote a deck and I did research and I gave myself every reason why not to do this. So as I was putting together the market sizing analysis, all the numbers that I knew, but I hadn't really synthesized in my brain, were like 1 in 6 children in America are disabled. 27% of the adult population under 64 have a disability.
Right.
Wow.
In 5 years from now, 602,000 children with autism are going to reach adulthood, and they are going to need care. An estimated 80% of them will need continued care. Who are they working with? Where are they finding these caregivers? And so that's really, what kind of sent me on my way. And I still harken back to that UCLA moment of, I did that, and I can do more.
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
Fantastic.
For those that are
from the site.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
For
Brian.
those that are listening but not viewing, the site is called truly.care. It's you don't need www anymore. https://truly.care. And I think, Sean, you're going to pull it up on the screen.
Thank you.
For us.
So yeah, we're focused on helping families who have kids to start and then soon adult children with extra support needs. And of course, we all know there's a wide range, helping them find babysitters and nannies and aides that they can trust. And so we're really, we're not iterating on what exists. We're taking great time to understand what families need and where their biggest concerns are, and building a platform that meets those needs. And most importantly, puts families like us in the, in first place. We're the priority. Right now, we're an afterthought on almost every platform, and we're built for us. And then, in success, it will be something everybody can use and benefit from. But first, we come first.
I want to piggyback on what you were saying about not doing what everybody else does. I have a family member, actually, in New York, who's elderly. I had a younger family member ask me, based on one of my posts on social media, really, about caregiving. And so thought of you, and then you mentioned differentiating yourself from what already exists. I think, for instance, there's an entity out there which is care.com, which is set to build that bridge. How does what Truly Care does differ from, say, them or maybe anybody else that is seeking to build that bridge between this caregiving community and the services?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I'm going to answer it, but I will also say if Care and Sitter City and Urban Sitter get their act together and fix the problem, there's still plenty of room for all of us because that many people need care.
I was going to touch on that too, because that's the one thing. The good problem to have is, who do I choose? Because there's so many entities,
Right.
So yeah, who would you? How would you differentiate what is done between the two?
So one of the key differentiators is how you originally come into the experience. When you come into any of the legacy platforms, you're given two choices: childcare, senior care, elderly care.
Okay.
If we use the example of an adult, right? So a 20-year-old boy with autism who needs extra support, he doesn't need childcare. He doesn't need a babysitter. And he certainly isn't an elderly person. So it's not even a category. So first and foremost, there's a category. But if you have a child, you really have to go down the rabbit hole on these platforms to indicate, create kind of like the additional layer of detail of, well, my child has this, 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 and this. And it is very disrespectful in a way, and kind of comes with some shame if you're not in the first bucket. If you're like, you have to qualify your kid, like child bud. And I don't like that at all. I want to be able to create open fields and just tell us what your needs are. Tell us about your family. Every family has stuff. It might be that the child doesn't have what would be considered a traditional disability, but there's been a death in the family. There's a divorce happening. There's a sick grandma. There's my child has attention issues, but there's no diagnosis. Like, there's just stuff. And so there's so much nuance and context. I don't like all the box checking and labels. When you go onto any of these platforms, it launches you straight into, when do you need care? Monday, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. That's also I'm not ready to answer those questions. And by the way, there's nuance there too. I might, Tuesdays I might have piano lessons, and Thursdays I might have PT, and Fridays sometimes we need to go to the park, and there's so much detail and context that's not allowed on these platforms. They give you like one sentence and a couple of boxes to check. And so very little information for the care providers to even assess, is this the job I want? Am I the most qualified person for this job?
Right.
And likewise, on the care provider side, they say nothing because they're not asked to. So they get like 1 or 2 sentences to describe themselves. And the families are like, I don't know who to trust. I don't know anything about these people. And why do they want these jobs? And, a lot of the care providers will use language, again, unintentionally, but like, I'm willing to work with kids, with special needs kids. Like, that is just so cringy to me. I want people who want to. And so a big part of what Truly is doing is creating an entire narrative, a brand, if you will, for the caregiving profession as a positive resume building experience for anyone, but especially for anyone pursuing a career or in a career in health or education. So this should be like soon a normalized stop on the path of your career. You can see the whole person and see their family and care for them, whether it's part-time, full-time. And it's something that people should be specifically looking for, these opportunities to help people with extra support needs. And on care, you find that it's just kind of a melting pot. You find people who are looking for a babysitting gig and they're willing to handle your kid. And families, I'm sure this resonates with you guys. That's not how I want anyone to think about working with.
Not at all.
Not at all. It's horrifying. So the whole approach is different. The way that we collect information and let each party tell their story and their values and their preferences and their concerns and all the stuff that's lost in translation when you don't have those opportunities. That's really the core difference, is making it more human and making it super inclusive by removing a lot of those boxes.
at the site where we noticed it said, join the waiting list. So the business exists, site is up and operational. So are people able to, at this point in time, register at the site and get a caregiver, or is there a process?
It is very early days. I launched in front of you guys
Yeah.
like
Right.
a week ago. And
Yeah.
building a marketplace is tough. Once it gets going and you kind of see that flywheel effect, it's good. But putting the supply and demand together so they match is really tough. What good am I to a family if I don't have a good arsenal of great care providers? So that is my focus right now. I'm working across, all the usual kind of social platforms and Nextdoor and those platforms, and also cultivating relationships with local academic institutions and my network to pull together a lot of care providers so that I can start, offering matches. And the other big difference that Truly will offer versus others is the others are kind of like classified ads. So anyone can post a job, anyone can apply.
Yeah.
For Truly, we want to create match recommendations. So like, we heard what you're asking for. These 3 or 4 people match 80% of what you're looking for, and here's why. And you can go search for yourself if it's not a good recommendation, but I want to help. I don't want people to feel like they have to become recruiters in this process, because every family who approaches this website is coming in some form of a crisis.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't think care appreciates that. And I know, because I've had 10 years of this crisis.
Yeah.
And I've talked to many of my friends to validate that they feel the same way. So my focus is building the care providers, but I'm asking everyone to join the wait list. So as soon as I have enough people, I can start matching. And I knew that families would be interested immediately, and they are. And I've had lots of families sign up, and that's great, so that I can just go down the list and start offering matches as soon as I have the care providers.
What I like about that is that, so you've answered my next question, which was going to be, is this limited to a certain region or anything like that? Obviously, at this point in time, it probably is. But what I like about this is that we get to kind of be on the ground floor of a great value and great service, because we're continuing to grow our reach. We don't have millions of followers and subscribers just yet, but those that do are true about doing so, and the numbers grow each day. And going back to that proverbial tree falling in the forest that we talked about earlier, we want to play any role that we can in building the bridge between what you do and the caregiving community. And we'd love to be able to grow with you in doing that.
That's great. Yeah, we'll figure something out. I'd love to offer all of your listeners a huge discount, because it's helping me grow the business. And LA is growing this with me. We are doing this together. That's how I see it. LA is my community, and in success, then we'll be able to bring it to San Francisco, to San Diego, New York, Chicago, all the other places. But this is going to be built for and by LA, and then a gift to the rest of the country.
Fantastic.
Stephen, are you registered with regional centers or self-determination, or people get some support in helping to pay for these services?
That's my plan. I mean, I've certainly seen personally, that the regional center and IHSS have been great resources for me to offset the costs of providing care for Sadie. And so the more families that are part of self-determination, what that allows is for you to have choice, to have agency over who cares for your loved one. Yeah. When you're not with self-determination, you are given a pretty limited list of agencies that you have to work with. So a lot of people have respite hours that are just left on the table. They go unused because they don't want to work with these agencies and they want more choice. And so for families who have self-determination, their entire or a portion of their childhood care costs could be covered, which means they have greater choice. And maybe, they can either pay a higher rate, or they just have more choice in who cares for their loved ones. So, and I will provide, at this point, we're not operating at scale. I have personally been providing that guidance to families who come and say, hey, I'm thinking about self-determination. Should I, shouldn't I? And I kind of provide that guidance, because you can take all those respite hours and support and actually use them and hire
Beautiful.
whoever you want.
Yeah, beautiful. Love that.
That's fantastic. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
that's becoming much more, accessible and available, self-determination. People realize that they can operate outside the regional centers and get some help and some support.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think that was born out of the need to have some choice and be, take care of the things that you need. Because as you say, not everything's cookie cutter. Families don't all fit into the same mold. Everybody has, some different need,
Yeah.
and single parent families and, are different than, when both parents are in the house. And so, there's a lot of variety. So I love that. I love that you're doing that. For me, it feels like you're doing what we kind of hope this entire, community moves towards, which is, help, taking care of yourself, parents, and taking care of your children. And again, having choice and having selection and being able to make sure that the whole family is taken care of. And that's really
when Andy and I reflect on why are we still married? Why are we happy? The honest truth, I mean, other than, we love each other, but the honest truth is we have care that takes away our need to bicker all the time about the little stuff. Did you make her bed? Did you brush her teeth? Did you make her lunch? All the things that you're supposed to do when kids are really little. That's just par for the course when you're parents of a young person. But as your kid gets older, you shouldn't still have to be doing those things. And that can grind a marriage down when you start to kind of resort to all the little things that you feel resentment for. And when you have care in the home, not only does it kind of remove that friction entirely and you can be a couple again, but for me, my experience has been that I'm able to be her mom and I don't have to be her PT and her OT and her speech therapist. She doesn't want that. And as soon, she gets older, she wants to see less and less of me, which breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
How old is she now again?
11. So
yeah, it's coming.
And I was going to ask you about your 14-year-old. How does she handle, is she being taken care of in this process? And is that part of your equation?
Yeah. I mean, when they were little, I used to say, I feel like I have two only children because Sadie's regression, it was rough. She would scream for hours. And then, for a period of time, she was having 20, 30 seizures a day. And
wow.
She's physically disabled and she communicates with an eye gaze computer. It was so hard for us to understand what she needed and help her. And those moments where she's screaming her head off, what we would do is race Lucy upstairs and put headphones on and just make sure she wasn't scarred by the trauma. Yeah. And then there were many times where we were racing Sadie to the emergency room because she was having intractable seizures, and Lucy was witness to all of that. And I know that has, scarred her, but I think because we're very open about it, because I don't force them together at all times. I've met with parents who make their kids do everything together. And sometimes that works for the family, but it doesn't work for ours. So we make sure that Lucy can have, experiences that are there's no friction with those experiences. We can do whatever we want. And then we do lots of things as a family. We try to take Sadie everywhere, but honor also that, if there's a catastrophe in Lucy's life, it might be that, she lost a road lip gloss, or, her socks don't match, or she got an A- instead of an A on something. And we have to honor that that's a big deal and not brush it off well, you don't have Rett syndrome, so it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So we've tried to really do right by her. And I think all in all, she's a great kid. She's very empathetic. She loves her sister, and she has a huge heart. And she told me she joined the Disability Allies Club at school. I didn't ask her to do anything like that, but she was drawn to that. That's so special. It's so special. When she was running for student government, in her speech, she talked about, having a sister with a disability and why that makes her, the kind of person that she is. And I'm really proud of her. But yeah,
I am too, and I don't even know her.
But it's been tough, and sometimes we've had to keep them apart and put those headphones on so she doesn't hear the screaming. But I don't even know if I've answered your question.
I know you did. No, it's
You did. And then
curious.
some, and then some, and then some. Yeah.
And I
we're
do
at
want
that
to
point.
also say, yeah, we're at the point before we just really quickly jump in. And I'm sure you know, I'm not sure you live in Los Angeles and you're in the entertainment industry. Greg Grunberg, who's a good friend of ours, who has his podcast called Talk About It. His son has epilepsy, and he's very massively involved in epilepsy advocacy, and you know, always one eager to, you know, communicate with other parents dealing with all that stuff. So if you haven't had a chance to do it, I think it would be a great idea for you to, you know, talk about Truly on Greg's podcast, because
We'll connect you guys.
Following.
Sure. Yeah, I know Kelly's friends with him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So we'll make that happen.
We're friends with.
Yeah,
yes,
we'll help as well. Anyways, we're at that point. So Sean, we're gonna ask you this question, Stephanie, and I'm fascinated to hear your answer. So
most definitely. This is the point in the show where, you know, we ask the following with context. Our ability to change the world, no matter how great or small, is based on or tied to our willingness or ability to change ourselves. So with that said, give us just one example of a thought or belief that you once believed strongly, but now no longer believe to be true.
It's a great question. And I heard you ask it on other shows. So I really did try to put some thought into the answer. You know, I think for me, growing up, as I was saying, I've had such a great support system. And so I've used it, you know, and I've relied on people to help me get stuff done. I think I've always been a very resourceful person in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But when I lost my mom, and then, you know, when I decided to start this business, I've never been a founder before. There's all these things that are coming my way that are so foreign. I've never had to do before with figuratively or literally my own two hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kind of assume like the way to be successful and the way to get through life is to, you know, leverage the community and look to other people to help, which is true. But for me, I think the biggest source of growth was I can do hard, unfamiliar things. I'm not too old to learn, and I can learn how to use new tools and learn how to do stuff that I never did before. And it's worth the time to invest in the learning process, because I'll feel so proud after. And then it kind of like what the UCLA thing did for me in leading me to what's next, what else can I do? Like each little thing that I learned how to do myself makes me bolder and braver to try something else that I haven't ever tried to do myself. And so that confidence that I have it within me has fueled a lot of the work for me as a first-time founder.
Wow.
Love it.
Perfect answer. Love that. Yeah. Love it. And just love that living by the whole, what else can I do? What else can I do? That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah. Really
amazing. I'm going to throw it up here on the screen one more time, but for those listening, it's truly.care. You go to https://truly.care. Check out what Stephanie and her team are doing, and join the community. And if you're a caregiver, sign up for this. We're amassing as many people we can to help in this community. And if you're a family in need, know that this is a great resource that's going to be coming your way. So Stephanie, thank you for coming on to this. And again, you're new. I can't wait for us to revisit this a year or two from now. And when you're having this massive success, and it's an international, you know, it's an international company, where we think that the need is definitely there. And we need somebody who's like you, somebody who is going to forge ahead and get stuff done, because that's what it's going to take. So thank you for being here today. It's amazing. As we sign off, let me just stop for a second and say thank you.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
Good. I'm glad. It goes by fast.
I really enjoy. I enjoy listening.
Go good. Oh, good. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. For all of you who catching us on podcast outlets or WSTX AM radio, thank you. If you have any comments or questions or anything for us, send us an email at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. We love suggestions. We're getting a lot of feedback these days. So please, questions, thoughts, suggestions of people we should talk to. And if you're catching us on our podcast, our website, I know what it is. It's called Just Do Dads, or just Do Dads podcast.com, or on our YouTube channel, subscribe and, leave comments. We always read and share the comments with our guests. Thank you to Billy Footwear. And Sean's going to talk about the den here. Before I send it over to him, I just want to say that now more than ever, and it seems to be true every week, now more than ever, empathy and love is so critical. Have some empathy. You don't know what's happening in somebody else's life. You don't know what's going on in their world. So rather than being judgmental, have some empathy. I understand that, as Stephanie said, everybody has something. You never know what it is. So have some empathy. And if you look at the world through lenses of love, the world's just a much more beautiful place. So with that, thank you again, Stephanie. I'm going to throw it over to Sean to close us out. Mr. Francis.
Thank you to everyone within the sound of my voice for tuning in. Remember, questions are more powerful than statements. Let's try and be a little more childlike, less childish. And while it's been said that misery loves company, and it's true, so does joy. And just keep in mind, you're not alone. You're one of us. Thank you so much. We love you. Thanks, Stephanie.
Stephanie, thanks again. We love you. See you again next week.